Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna Street. I am the Secretary of the Manitoba Social Science Teachers Association, and I am here this morning to introduce Heidi Crowley, who is a grade 7 to 11 teacher at Grey Academy. The session that you're here today for is Global Health Activism Using Kids Boost Immunity. And Heidi is going to share her experiences this morning using resources from Kids Boost Immunity in her classroom. And I will pass it over to Heidi at this point.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just share my screen, and that way we can all see the same thing together. If you'll just give me a minute here. Here we go. Okay. So I've been using Kids Boost Immunity in my classroom now for a few years, and I love it so much, especially in the time of COVID, where suddenly we need a ton of flexibility in how we teach and even where we teach. And so I wanted to share it with you guys today because I do think even as of Monday, you could be using it in your classes and having a very, very impactful time with it. So I'm going to be going into the what it is and why it's so great. And then we will look at the student side of it. So what they're seeing, we'll build your own classrooms. I'm going to share with you some lesson plans for KBI that will match up directly with every province's curriculum. They're not posted yet, but they are going to be shared with you via this presentation. And I should mention my email is going to be at the end of the presentation. This entire slideshow is of yours. So if you send me an email, I will make sure that not only do you get this presentation, but you get access to every lesson plan, or if you need any further resources. So I'm very excited. I'm going to dive right in. Before I do, of course, I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge where I'm presenting from today. And I know so many of you are right across Ontario and Quebec and Manitoba. So today I'm going to be presenting from Treaty 1 land in class, and just personally, I often think about the land, but more than that, what the treaty really means, and the ways that our society is beginning to realize that we are not upholding our side of it, despite the fact the First Nations of Canada have long upheld it. And I think we're seeing the symptoms of this in Nova Scotia and in BC, but I think in every community across Canada, we're having a reckoning, especially this year when we've actually stopped to pause. I wanted to kind of bring this site to everyone's attention because I know for myself as a settler in the classroom, taking a time to pause and making sure that treaty rights are spoken to, but also spoken to from an Indigenous perspective as well. I can't. And this year having a speaker come in was a little bit more difficult. So this is Whose Land. There are wonderful land acknowledgement videos that you can show to your class. And then of course, the important is like the talk after as to what they mean and what stayed with them and what they've kind of resonated with. Whose Land also has an interactive map of all treaties across Turtle Island. It's a fabulous resource. So I know so many of us this year are trying to really have a class that is meaningful, even if it's online. And because this is all video and online, it would be a really simple, but a really important way to make sure that we're still striving for our goals of inclusion and also to be or at least becoming better treaty partners. So I just wanted to kind of share that resource and to acknowledge where I'm presenting from, Winnipeg. So KBI is a website, kidsboostimmunity.com, very simple. It is global activism with a click of a button. But you know how sometimes like you do the global activism where you're like, I clicked something and I think I signed a petition and I don't really know. This is actually making the kids work through a series of topics that are directly related to our curriculum. 3 levels of government, how does your immune system work, global inequality. These are all directly tied to our curriculum, but as they learn the lesson and as they take the quizzes, they're actually earning vaccines for kids around the world who are in need. So this is in partnership with public health, UNICEF, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. This isn't like a little like fly by night, like these are true partners who want to impact kids, and they also obviously want to show kids how important taking action is. The content and concepts are excellent, and it's Canadian content, which I know is a huge deal for us in the classroom, because oftentimes when these kinds of programs come up, a lot of them we can't use because it's talking about, Congress does this, or it's talking about, the 13, and we're like, no, that's, no, thank you. So Canadian content, fabulous. The content is basically grade 4 to grade 12 friendly. So that's also wonderful. It is coast to coast to coast, and I'll show you how they've connected that to every province and territory's curriculum. It is both individual, so students are doing it on their own, but because you're building a class and a team, they're also kind of earning vaccines for their team, which is great. And last year alone, they raised 5,500 vaccines, this year alone, I should say, which is amazing. So on Wednesday of this week, I KBI'd with my kids in class. It was a grade 9 class. They've done it before, so we kind of just went right into it. And we had 55 minutes. I really wanted them to learn the 3 levels of government. It's kind of like a meat and potatoes. We'd already done like the introduction discussion. How does government help us? What are the services? And I just needed them to really kind of municipal, provincial, federal, and really kind of just make sure that they had them cemented. And in the past, sometimes I would have done this as like a textbook or a research, or just here we go. The great thing about KBI though is you get the same exact quality content, but as they're doing it, they're also being active global citizens. And so within a 55-minute class, the students had earned 145 vaccines for kids who needed them around the world. And they were really, really motivated to do it. And the great thing is that because they're doing it together, you'll see someone turns to the person next to them, 1.5 meters apart, but turns to the person next to them and say, I can't get this one. And then someone's like, provincial. No, remember, provincial is like looking at like health and education. No. It's like sewers, right? So that's like a city. So they're actually clarifying and helping each other, which is always a nice thing, because when you can teach it, you get to know it better. So as I say, it's that collaborative individual balance that really works nicely with the KBI. So my why, I teach in Winnipeg. This is my school. It's Grey Academy. I love my school. I love my kids. But I know that in any given year, my personal goal of getting the kids active, getting them participatory, getting them to understand their own power as citizens, I often feel like, okay, we can't put a field trip in. We've run out of time. This year, it's just like, nope. So because of that, having these online activism possibilities, especially with something where it's actually like a metric, they can count. I've just earned 4 vaccines. That's 4 kids who are going to get a shot that they need in order to live healthy lives. 2020, I feel like, is a year that the students are really understanding things like global inequality, but the idea as well of like a certain amount of powerlessness in your life, right? Where there are things that are so beyond your control. And I think for a lot of us living in the developed world, we have things beyond our control, but really big systemic stop you in your tracks. There's nothing you can do about it. I think it was a reckoning for a lot of us, including our kids. And so I think there's a little bit of an empathy building as well, where they kind of think, I know when it feels like when something's completely unfair, and a health scare or health issues completely can derail everything. And so that kind of buy-in is a little bit different. About 5 years ago, I got called into my administrator's office, which is always like you're going through your head, like, what did I do? What emails did I send? What have I said? And it was a very nice conversation, but my administrator said, you've been talking about vaccines and the anti-vax movement in your class. There's a student in your class who hasn't been vaccinated. They don't feel comfortable talking about vaccines in your class. And 5 years ago, there was still this kind of like, okay, we won't discuss it. We won't talk about it. But in the last few years, what I've really felt and what I've really seen and really appreciated, in all honesty, is that the pseudoscience is considered to be too dangerous not to talk about. in the same way that climate change deniers don't get air anymore. And I think that's really important, that we bring into our classroom these contentious issues that might actually directly affect our kids, right? Because our kids still might be of an age that they were through family choice not vaccinated. I think it's really important as we talk about the possibilities of COVID vaccinations or kids who need vaccinations around the world who can't get them, to understand how that movement kind of came to be and the best intentions of the parents making choices, and the power of misinformation and disinformation, and how that can have a very real impact on communities. So I teach grade 7 to 11 social studies in terms of kids. The curriculum I teach every year is grade 7 to 12. So I get to do a little bit of everything. And I'm a big fan of anything that has really quality information. And the KPI for me, the fact that it's every single piece of information is reviewed by public health before it's allowed to be posted is huge, especially for something like a topic on COVID or a topic on immunity. We're learning so much so quickly. We do need a site that is quality Canadian information that is verified by health experts. So for me, that's my why. And I think everyone is kind of sitting at home with their own why. Maybe you were like, I need something for Monday. Cool. Or maybe it's just like, I'm not teaching in my classroom the way I want to be teaching because I want my kids to have some kind of agency. I want them to have some kind of empower, and they're at home. What do I do? I'm a huge fan of the facing history and ourselves pedagogy. And I'm just going to move my little box here. This is where I always start with the kids, the me, because we know me pretty well, right? We talk about our own stories, our own experiences, even like the experiences of the people around us. We start moving into the we and they. We look at how it came to be. We start looking at the ethics, the legacy, the judgment. And then, I don't know about you guys, this is the one I'm always trying to get to. And I feel like I get to the end of a unit and I just like run out of time. And so I just skip ahead and start a new unit. But for me, that choosing to participate, that engagement of students to actually have an impact on the world is probably the most meaningful. And it's the one that gears them up the most to be able to take on the new unit. So in social studies, we often talk about very, very big issues, and we often talk about issues that aren't necessarily happy ending issues. And so to just go from issue to issue to issue with sustainability, and then we're going to move into Indigenous relationships in Canada, then we're going to be moving into poverty. Like in some years, you kind of think like this feels like a tour of like things that we are really struggling with. To not have that choosing to participate means that the students never, ever, ever have that hope. So you're kind of going through the cycle. Right? You're even getting to the judgment part of like, what are the ethics? How can we do better? But you never actually get the kids to practice doing better. And so I think that's the great thing about Kids Boost Immunity is that as they're learning, they're helping. And so even if you don't have a freestanding choosing to participate activity, throughout the entire unit, they've chosen to participate. And so for me, that was a huge help because I felt like I was really missing something that the kids needed. So this is why it impacts my classroom so well. I think the thing I like about it the most is that because it was made by teachers for teachers, the website is set up knowing how kids do online work. And so the very first day that the kids try it, they're like, oh yeah. So they click onto a topic. They don't read the article. They don't watch the video. They just scroll down to the quiz and they're like, okay, here we go. And then they realize within a question or two, I need to read the article closely. I need to understand this topic because these questions are making sure I understand the topic, I know the content, and I can also explain things. It's all multiple choice, but the multiple choice is made in such a way that you can't skip over. And we're actually going to look at it today from a student point of view, so you can kind of see those questions. And I think that's what I like about it the most, is that the way it's designed is that it's completely accessible. Grade 7 to 12, I've had no problems doing it. But from grade 7 to 12, anyone who tries to rush, anyone who tries to, skip the steps and not actually learn the content, they can't complete it. And so I think that's a really good reminder to kids that just because it's online doesn't mean it's just like click, clack, done, that you do actually have to do the work. So I really like that aspect of it. So in the news this year, the students are going to be hearing these terms: herd immunity, even something as simple as vaccines, virus, immunity, efficacy, the World Health Organization. Last week, right, the disinformation story was the monkey vaccine that Oxford was creating that was going to turn everyone into monkeys, and the meme of Boris Johnson as a monkey. I think it's very easy for us when we hear of a Trump tweet, when we see a monkey meme, to kind of laugh and say like, oh my gosh. But when we look at the data from 2020 and when we look at the multi-year pattern, what we're seeing is that even the World Health Organization is stepping up to talk about like 5G networks don't cause COVID. So stop tearing down 5G towers. These are things that are actually impacting people's lives. We know that our students are getting their media from different places. And so those are places that sometimes can have more misinformation or disinformation. And we need to build those tools for them, not to say don't use those, they're going to be using them, but to build the tools to make sure that they know how to question things. So even something as simple as the KBI lesson on critically thinking about our news sources, looking at information, looking at how accurate or relevant it is, those are also very helpful. So if I look across this year, everything about it tells me that COVID has just shone a light on a pre-existing problem, which was, of course, conspiracy theories, fake news, disinformation. And so I think we have to really kind of look at these quality sources and use them to build a really strong foundation of understanding. In a few years, our kids are going to be making decisions about, are they going to be getting a corona vaccine? Are they going to be, as parents, right? All of these things how do they digest their news? Where do they go for their news? How does their immune system work? Why is it important? Like all of these things. And so KBI has really quality information on really, really big topics. And I think they can be used as a really strong foundation to make sure that the students leaving your classroom really understand at least the science behind the issues, the facts behind the issues. And that way, when they're coming across this misinformation or disinformation, they have that kind of like, wait a minute, that's very contradictory to what I've learned. I think oftentimes misinformation, disinformation is very compelling, is very emotionally designed. But if you have the facts, you have something to rebut it with. If you don't know enough about it, it can start to take root. So these are just a few stories from the last week. I just went on to a few news sources. And for all of these stories, if you didn't have a basic understanding of herd immunity, even something like what is the immune system, how does it work, viruses, vaccines, if you didn't have an understanding of all of that, the news story would be confusing. It would be very easy to misinterpret it. And so I think the vocabulary building from KBI as well is really, really important. So this is just how I always put my lessons in place. And I always start with the me. So sometimes I'm right, it's just a word. So in a Google form, I'll have the students tell me a roast, right? That's a good thing. So what's one positive thing you did over the summer, or what's one thing that the slowdown from COVID has really allowed you to do? Thorn, what's the thing that bothers you the most? What's the thing that you are really, missing doing? And then the bud, like what's your biggest hope as you move through this year? And you could do this for anything. You could do rose, thorn, bud for literally any topic. What's the most positive thing that a government program does for you? What's the biggest problem do you think in the government today? And if you could make any new program for the government, a service to offer people, what would it be? So rose, thorn, bud. If you click on rose, thorn, bud, it's already linked up to full instructions. It's a really easy reflection to start the class with. They can share it. They can do it on their own. You know your kids best to know how they would do it. It can be done online easily. It can be done in person, or it can be done in a blended classroom. So that's one opportunity if you want to start the kids thinking about a topic and how it connects to them. The other one I've been doing in my classroom, at least a part-time in-person classroom, is take a stand. And I'll just kind of quickly show you. It gives the students an opportunity to actually stand, which I know sounds so small compared to like how we'd usually have the kids moving, but they're allowed to stand. And so for these questions, they either stand with their hands up, they just stand, they sit, or they sit with their hands on their head to show how they would agree or disagree with a question. So taking classes online is better than taking them in person. Some of these questions actually end up being more insightful for me, so I can help better design my classes, better meet the needs of my students. Sometimes issues I didn't even know were existing and the students might not have even articulated yet come out in these kind of take a stand. Sometimes they're very specific, sometimes they're very general. So we have discussions about climate change and the kind of like the long-term massive impact versus COVID today. We talk about how governments have reacted, right? The idea of how much of it is just what you're born with. This one actually gets the students quite riled with a debate amongst themselves. This one taught me that students in my class this year do not like group work. They are very anti-group work. They love partner work, unexpectedly, but group work, not so much. So as we go through these, the students get a chance to start moving around, but it's also kind of reminding them it's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to debate things. It's okay to use your personal experiences to answer things. So sometimes something as simple as that as a way to kind of engage the students works very, very well. So again, these are all shared in case you want to use one, all, any. So if we can all go into our browser. So if we go to our browser, we're going to be going to kidsboostimmunity.com. I'm going to just bring it up onto the page here, and you should be able to see it up at the top, kidsboostimmunity.com. So as you're doing that, I'm just going to check in and look at the chat, just in case anyone has posted any questions or anything. Now, I just have to figure out, oh, here we go. So if everyone's on the page, what we're going to do first is we're going to see it from a student point of view. And the idea being that if you know how the students are using it and what they're seeing, you'll better be able to help them, and you'll also know the impact of it. So I've already made a classroom. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick heads up as to what our code is. So if you want to take a pen and just write this down, it's lowercase Crowley -PD 2020. Kept it simple. So Crowley PD 2020. So we're going to go over here to a sign up on the Kids Boost Immunity. We're going to do it together, and we're going to say that we're students. And the reason is that if you sign up as a teacher or even a student teacher, you can't earn vaccines, which is good. We want the students to be doing it. But what ends up happening is that you can't really see how it works. So we're going to just pretend that we're students. So I'm going to say that I'm Heidi C, because I am. And it's just last initial. All right, they do their best to keep students very anonymous, keep them safe. So our team registration code was Crowley PD 2020. I'm going to make myself a little password here. They'll tell me on the side if it likes it, if they match. And then the big one, we have to make sure that we do the caption at the bottom. I'm not a robot, I say with some pride. So Crowley PD 2020, right? And when we're done all that, we're going to hit create new account. Now, this is the tricky thing, because we're all signing up kind of around the same time, it might have a delay. Don't click it twice because they'll start making extra accounts for you. Just click it once and give it a minute. You can see at the very top, the browsers, she's turning. Yeah, there we go. I don't need you to save it. That's great. Okay, now keep in mind, if anyone is having any trouble, if you just go into the chat and say like trouble, we can go through again how to log in, what the code is, if you need the code repeated. So I'll just wait a minute in case anyone needs to finish clicking or needs to make sure that their account can be created. Okay, so this is the page that the students see when they sign up. They have lessons, leaderboards, my team, but the one that they're probably going to start off with is lessons. And it's going to bring them to a page that shows them all the available lessons that they can complete. And you get to pick what you want them to start with. Because we're social studies, why don't we do global inequality? If you see that on the list, global inequality will be our first one. We can earn up to 9 vaccines on this one. That's always nice. So if I click on it, you'll notice that there's like a little drop down that shows up. Now, all of these quizzes are locked right now. And the reason they're locked is that I haven't done the very first quiz. As soon as I do the first quiz, it's not worth any vaccines. It's just a way to make sure I understand the instructions and what to do. When I go into that, it's going to give me a few sample questions, 2 of them, so that I can get used to how to do the quiz. So for every dollar invested in vaccines, developing countries, now sadly I know this because I've KBI'd quite a few times. So for every dollar invested, there's actually a $16 return for that community, whether it's savings in future health issues, whether it's missed work and schooling. So it's pretty phenomenal when we look at a single vaccine and the impact it can have. So we start our kids understanding how much help they're giving people. And then the second question, I think it's 20 seconds, might be 60. Yeah. Making sure the students understand what's at stake. How many kids are waiting for vaccines who just can't afford them or don't have access to them, and how important it would be to have UNICEF get them to them. So what you'll see though is now that we've done the 0-0, right, that very first entry, it'll allow me now to go in to my global inequality quizzes and start earning vaccines. So every quiz has like an intro 0-0. You just have to go through it. You don't earn any vaccines for it. But then after that, you'll notice all of the quizzes have now unlocked themselves. That means that I can go through. Now, in order to earn a vaccine, I have to get 80% or higher on a quiz. For the younger years, they let you take the quiz a couple times because they know, for grade 7, it could take a couple times to get it. But for the older years, if you sign up your class to be, say, like a grade 11, they have to be careful with it because they might only get 1 or 2 chances to take a quiz in order to earn any vaccines. And so it really does slow the students down. So what it will look like is something like this. You'll get lesson 1, and it'll start going through a really basic topic like life expectancy, what affects how long people live, right? And really basic terms goes into a lot of different reasons that people might have shorter or longer lifespans. And so the students will read this over. Right, understanding that access, just sheer luck of geography, where you have to be born, what the government is like there, what the economy is like there, all of that comes into play. And then they go into if the world was 100 people. And then last but not least, they show it in a video. Right? And all of this, as I say, is excellent quality information. A lot of it is from the newest research and data coming out. It will be cited, so you have an understanding as to where the information is coming from, which is also really good modeling for the students. And then when they're done and they've read it all, they can take notes if they want to. They can read this over in teams if they want to, and then take the quizzes on their own. You know your kids best and what their needs are, but it goes through the information and then you start the quiz. As you go through, it'll let you know how you're doing. So you can kind of count how many incorrects and corrects you have. After you've done the quiz, if you earn 80% or higher, you will notice at the very top right here, where it says 0 vaccines right now, your count will start to go up. It'll say 1 vaccines, 2 vaccines, 3 vaccines, and very quickly the number will increase. And for students, that's usually the most exciting thing, is to watch their tally increase. And sometimes if I have a group who's been doing it for a while and they know what they're doing, then I'll put the leaderboard on the board, like the classroom board, and they can see which students have earned. Oh, sorry, my class has now earned 166. Way to go, guys. We have 4 students in today, and we haven't earned any vaccines yet. But we can see we have our 4 people here, and they can all be earning as we go. Does anyone have any questions about what the students see or what they're doing with it? No? Okay, so I'm going to log out just from my end. And I'm going to log back in as a teacher so that you can kind of see what it looks like. Okay, so as a teacher, when I go in, I do have the teacher center now available to me. But for me, I always go into my teams. I want to see how my kids are doing. It tells me in any given year how we were doing. So if I wanted to, when I had my grade 9s doing it in the class, we had the names up and they could kind of see like, okay, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And they could be competing with each other, or at the very least, they could see that their vaccines had been counted into the class total. As I say, this was one period, but they really did fly with it, and they learned about the 3 levels of government. So from this, what you would do is you'd go into My Teams when you wanted to add a class and go into Add a Team. So on your end, why don't you go into the Log Out and go back into Sign Up. And this time we're going to sign up as a teacher. You'll notice that French is available. The lesson plans and everything are currently being translated using a French educator and French educational resources. So it is coming online. So if you are, or if you know someone who does prefer to have it in French, it's easy. And you just sign up. I'm going to sign up with a fake account. And I'm going to use my Gmail only because I've already used my school account, but you should be using your school account for this. And that way they know the school. Some of the schools are already in, and some of them, oh, okay, will need to be added, but it's no big deal. I'm going to just try it again. Let's see if it'll let me. Probably won't though. Okay, Madison, I'm going to use yours. I'm sorry. Nope, you need yours. I'm going to use a friend at school. Here we go. Actually, I'll need to let her know. And still not a robot. Okay. So now that I'm in, I'm just waiting now for my confirmation email to go through. Can you let me know in your chat if anyone has any problems? You're just waiting for a verification email to show up on your school site that you used. So whatever email address that you use, just pop in there. If you don't see an inbox, quickly look into your spam because Kids Boost Immunity might be a new site. Your email might not recognize it and think accidentally that it is spam. So just take a look there just in case. Okay, so I think everyone's in. So what you would do is you go to My Teams and you can just add a team. This is how you add a class. So you go to add a team. There's a little video in case you want it, or even how to get your students to register. There's a video there. For the most part, it's pretty straightforward. I usually call my class, like the title of it, the topic, the grade, and the year, because that way if I use it for multiple years, I'm not going to get mixed up. Again, you can put your school in here. If you can't find your school, it's no big deal. You just click here. If you wanted to, you could add a team description. I generally don't. It's like, this is social studies. Okay. But you can if you want to. You can put in a picture that you prefer if you want. I generally just let them throw in whatever icon they want. And then for team size, I always put it up to 35 because there's always a student who forgets their password and suddenly can't log in anymore. Or you might have some EAs in your class who also want to check it out. You might decide halfway through that a partnership isn't working and you want them to work on their own. So even if you don't have 35 in your class, put 35. Always is a good way to do it. And then here you get to pick what you want your code to be. Generally, I let the kids in class pick, and so we end up with ones like pickles or like kitten cat. But you can pick whatever you like. And then it'll tell you right at the bottom here, this is the code you're going to give the students so that they can create their own accounts and register with the class. The very last thing you're going to do is pick the grade. The grade will dictate what lessons are posted. There's some that aren't appropriate for grade 4, and so they won't be posted as lessons if you are teaching a grade 4 class. If you're teaching grade 12, you'll notice that it has a tendency to be a little bit more of a longer list. But some of the simpler ones aren't necessarily in there because they're meant for grade 4, 5, 6. So just pick whatever you like, and then you just save it. So it'll give you a little confirmation up here that you've created it. It'll remind you of your user code just in case you forgot to write it down. It happens. And yeah, it goes into a lot of different things. If you wanted to, you can post, updates and those kinds of things. Honestly, I wouldn't say my students sign in a lot outside of our classroom activities, but I have a tendency to use this multiple times throughout my year in every class. So we do one where it just like get to know the site, try to earn 5 vaccines anywhere that you want to. And then as we start moving into, say, our human rights unit, we start looking at global inequality and Canada's global interactions. And so we start going back to it again and again and again. And then the next year we do a different topic. And what I've noticed is that every year that they get to do it, they don't lose their enthusiasm and their interest in it, but because it's so familiar to them, they remember their lessons. They're like, okay, I can't rush. I can help my friends, but the questions actually will be slightly different. So say like if it's a multiple choice, A, B, C, D might be different on yours than someone else's. So you can't say, oh, I picked 8. You have to explain to them what the correct answer is and why. And so the site really is built to make sure that students are maximizing their learning and they're really getting what they're supposed to be getting. So as I say, I use it multiple times in a year within every class. And I would think that the students would get bored with it, but they don't. They just kind of dive right back in where we left off. In a year, I would use it probably maybe 2 to 3 times in each course. And then the next year and the next year and the next year. And the students get very tell us how our school is doing compared to other schools, because you can see that. So if we take a look at the leaderboards here, it'll show us St. Patrick High. So once upon a time, Grey Academy was pretty high up there. And now, because so many schools are signing up, which is so amazing, we're on the second page. we're low on the list. And that's because this year, just because with COVID and everything, I have delayed introducing it to the kids. And so you can see we've earned just over 2,400 as a school. But this year we're only at 164. Sorry, we've answered questions, I should say. But we're only at 164 this year, and last year doesn't count. Every year is different. And so when the students get to see this as well, this also, I have students in the class who are like, can we please just go back in and just see if we can get one higher, just one higher. And they can see the top schools, they can see the top teams. Again, right, they might kind of be like, oh man, we're page 5. And that also can sometimes create a little bit of competition for them. So you can take a look as well internationally, provincially. So it's very exciting. Right? Provincially, we do very well. We're like, oh, hey, representing Manitoba. But suddenly, when we start looking internationally, we get to see all around the world different schools that are doing it, different people that are doing it, and we can also see historically what the top schools were. So. Grey Cat, we've earned 3,000 vaccines for kids. We're a very small school, so we have about 500 kids, I would say, in any given year. So that is something that the students know that they have helped people. The great thing about it too is that it's free. And I often feel sometimes when we do fundraisers or those kinds of things, there are those kids in class who kind of think I'd like to take part. I would like to help people, but I am limited by my resources. And so this is a very free, very egalitarian way to do it. So yeah, I wanted to show you some of those lesson plans because, as I say, they're not posted, but they all jive up with everyone's provincial or territorial needs. So this one is on misinformation. If you click on any of the titles, it'll automatically pull up the entire lesson for you. So I'm just going to show you what I mean by this. Sometimes you're like, okay. So this is the lesson. You'll notice, I'm just going to point this out for Quebec. Right now, these are just being added, still the curricular outcome. And when I said the French lessons are just being added, I think there's about 5 up right now, and they're being regularly added to. Lily Christ is the contact person. I'll give you her email address in case there's any ones that aren't made yet that you do want. So this is it. Everything has a link. These are all the CBC articles, the Facing History, different podcasts that the students can use. You have your activating, and these can be done either in school live or at home. And so basically, you want the kids to understand what misinformation is. And so you're going to have them look at misinformation and disinformation, and look at news articles, look at real news to kind of see is this a good valid source, is it not, how do we use misinformation and disinformation to mislead people, what could be some of the motivations and those kinds of things. Then you're going to be using the KBI lesson to really make sure they understand what's the difference between misinformation, disinformation. When I go onto a new website, what are the things I should be looking for? How do I know that this is a really good resource versus one that isn't so great? And as they're learning about it and doing those quizzes, again, they're earning vaccines. There's already a built-in worksheet for the students to do, should you want them to, while they're doing the quiz. It has the questions here. The students would just go into file, make a copy, write their answers right in as they do the quiz, as they do the reading, I should say, before the quiz. And then when they're done, they just share it with you. So it is kind of made to be ready to use. And then the very last thing that they're going to do, now that they know what the difference is and how websites can be misleading, etc., they're going to be listening to a podcast about how we post or why misinformation, disinformation is so compelling, anything. And the time here might kind of tell you which podcast would be best for your kids. And then they would just do either a group share or a personal reflection there. There also is another option if they wanted to, where they can find something that a lot of people believe, but it actually is not true. And they can write a speech about the research that they've done to prove that this isn't true, what the data is, what the sourcing is, how they proved this to be false. And there's a little assessment rubric with it already done for you if you wanted to. You don't have to, but again, all of this matches up directly with any curricular outcome in your province. So everything is done. The idea is that a teacher, if they wanted to, can look through, decide to do all of the activities, one of the activity, none of the activities, really up to you. This one is about smallpox and its impact on Indigenous communities, specifically in BC. It fits very well with the 4 to 6, but if you know from your senior years that you are looking at, say, Indigenous history in Canada in grade 11 or grade 10, you could also use it there. The idea with these is that not only are there full worksheets, everything that you would need for the students to complete, but we also have added in any answer keys that you might need as well, in case there are convergent questions versus divergent. They're there to help you and make it so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time. This year in particular, I know teachers are sometimes dealing more with the social emotional than they ever have in the past. And so to suddenly think like, okay, I need to make, 3 new worksheets and I need to do this and I want to do this, it can be too much. And so these are here for you. They are completely yours to use, take apart, only use part of. There are many, many more teaching with trees, immunity and vaccines so that the kids have that vocabulary. Some of them are cross-curricular with science or ELA outcomes. Some of them are just freestanding that you can kind of do in your class. And these are just a few that kind of came to mind that you would be able to use. But there are many. And so any topic at all, or if you have a colleague at school that you think, you know what, I actually noticed there's a lesson on the list for it. Is there a lesson planned for it? If you ask KBI, I know they're constantly in development, both in French and in English. So the 2 women who are the leads on the KBI team, there's Kathy Miller, and they kept the emails very simple. So Kathy at kidsboostimmunity.com. She's the English kind of organizer. She is a classroom teacher with decades of experience, and she is basically incredible. And anything you ask of her, she will do her best to provide. And same thing with Lily. She is doing incredible work with the French side too. So in case you kind of think, I wouldn't mind actually having one in English, one in French, they are in the development right now. For me, this is my email address. This is my school phone number in case you like to phone. I'm always in class, so it would be like a fruitless phone call, but I can call you back. But the email is always easy. Anything at all, even sometimes, when you're like, I'm trying to get in and it's saying I need permission, sometimes it happens with the Google Docs, I know. But even if you want to sign up your class and you want to create like a 2-class grade 7 competition with Winnipeg, and we'll start on the same day, and I would love that. So anything at all that you have so far as questions, please don't hesitate. We do actually have a couple of minutes now in case there's any questions that you wanted to look at or anything you wanted to review again. So if you just put them in the chat, I think that'd be the easiest way for us to see. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, the Canadian content, someone just commented like Canadian content, that's amazing. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy. And there's some beautiful websites out there. Brown University with their Choices program does an incredible work, but it's all American. And so everything in it is from a very American perspective, which is good in some ways, but also tricky in others, especially for social studies. We need the Canadian content. And the fact that it's high quality, recent Canadian content, I think it makes it even better. So feel free to share this resource with your friends. This year is a record year for the number of teachers across Canada using KBI. It is a government program. It is a public health program. It's in partnership with UNICEF. And so I think those things as well make it a little bit more, I don't want to say reputable, because I think there are NGOs that are incredibly reputable who aren't government tied, but it does make sure that the quality is really, really high. Oh, we have another comment. Yeah, you know what? Someone has asked, is there a way to set up your student accounts beforehand? That's what I did my first year, actually. So I made the class and then I logged out and then I did a sign up, sign up, sign up, and I put in my kids' names for them. So I put in, like Nikita T, Talia K, Sam B, and I just made them for them because they know their name. And what I did was I just did like a group password because I was like, listen, if you want to earn vaccines or someone else, you go for it. And it actually ended up working really well. The only reason I didn't in the years later is that by that time I had like 5 classes doing it. I was like, no, I just can't. But the first year when I just had the grade 7s doing it, setting up the kids' accounts beforehand was amazing. It was so easy because of course they know how to spell their name. So after that, they go not into the sign up, but into the login, and their sign in will be like Natasha T. Okay, they know that. And then their password will be the same for everyone in the class. You can make it something simple like your name 20, or they can be something like your name, the name of your school, or the name of your class mascot, or anything, right? So if you do a group password for those, instead of trying to make a password for every kid as you make their account for them, you'll find that way easier. But yeah, that one is actually a really big time saver. You know what? I get the most buy-in as long as I start it by grade 7 or 8. If I don't start it by grade 7 or 8 and I suddenly introduce it in grade 11, but then they're just like, listen, just like tell me what hoops you want me to jump through. I'm going to jump through them. Don't expect them to get too excited about it. But if I've had them doing it since grade 7 and grade 8 and grade 9, and they're getting to do different lessons every time, and it's tying in directly with what we're doing in class, I've never had a class who hasn't been engaged with it. I have had the odd individual who has been really frustrated with it until they realize they need to slow down. And it's usually there's like an inverse relationship with the kids who are really good at computers and really good at tech. Sometimes get really frustrated at first because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so used to like zoom, 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 zoom. And that kind of slowdown sometimes has a little bit of a curve for them. But as long as I started early, I find it's great. For the grade 11s, I would say if you're going to be going in cold with like a grade 11 class, if you really emphasize like why they're doing it and that 80% and the fact they only get one shot at it, I think that would be really impactful. But for me, the best buy-in always is grade 7 and grade 8, and then going on up with it. I'm trying to think if there's, no, the grade 11s are the only class I tried cold one year. And in fairness, I don't think I did a great job of explaining it too much. I made it more into like, this is instead of textbook questions, which it was, instead of saying, and this helps people around the world, and here's all the cool ways it does it, and explaining it much more to them. So if you are going to be doing it with a higher grade and you've never done it before, I would really emphasize the global activism part versus just like the meat and potatoes content part. Okay, well, thank you guys for the questions. I think that the chat is open in case suddenly like a question comes to you, but hopefully you've all written down my contact info right here as well. Don't hesitate. And it could be like 2 years later that you're like, you might remember me. It's totally fine. I get very, very, oh, sorry, I just had a student email me like, I forgot my password on on KBI, help me. So I really do feel passionately about this. I love this program so much. And so please don't hesitate in case you're like, I feel like I'm bothering her. Not at all. If you're interested in doing something where you want to do like a distance partner, so like my grade 7's partner with your grade 7s to do a task, I would love that as well. I teach grade 7 to grade 11, so goodness knows I have a class for you. But please also don't hesitate in case you're like, well, I teach grade 4. Not a problem at all. I have looked over the curriculums, but more than that, I know the program, and if I don't know the program, I can get you in touch with Kathy or with Lily, who can answer any question. But yeah, I'm so pleased that you guys were able to be here, and don't hesitate to reach out. And I hope I'm going to be seeing some of your schools on that list of, new classes and leaderboard, to see the impact.
All right. Thank you so much, Heidi, for sharing your experiences and the resources available with Kids Boost Immunity. I really enjoyed following along and getting a feel for the site and seeing what was available. So just anybody that's watching, I just want to say, as Heidi mentioned, her email is available. You can always reach out for the resources, or if you want to put a request in the chat, I think it's only available for the next 30 minutes. So I can definitely relay those over as well. Or, I mean, you can get in touch with anybody at MISTA or OHASTA, and I'm sure they can get us in touch. So lots of ways to get us in contact. But thank you so much, Heidi. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.